Every episode of Game of Thrones was like a global Netflix party that the whole world came together to watch, and there's never been anything quite like it. So when the prequel show House of the Dragon was announced, fans were over the moon. And in today's video, we're talking about whether it's going to be better than Game of Thrones. Let's get started. First up, the show is based on a completed story. Remember how Game of Thrones was ridiculously good as long as it was following the books? No, really, it was so good you couldn't look away for a second. When the episode was over, you thought about it for the next few days. It always left you wanting more. The characters were all complex, rich, and multi-dimensional. Fans were always so invested in everything that was going on, and there was always so much going on. It was all sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows as long as they were following the books. Okay, in reality, it was all murder, betrayal, and a lot of incest, but you know what we're getting at. It was absolutely fantastic. But as soon as the story crossed the books and the source material ran out, the show quite literally lost the plot. The characters started acting out, the storylines didn't make any sense, and it even felt like the actors couldn't really make it sell. And they were all phenomenal. Overall, the quality of the show suffered a lot because the story in the books wasn't complete. But guess what? House of the Dragon is based on a completed book. The source material is all there to take from. Even if the show chooses to go a different route, there's still something it has to fall back on. And that alone gives the prequel show an advantage over Game of Thrones. Moving on, House of the Dragon's story will be more focused. Game of Thrones had so much going on at all times, and that was the show's best part sometimes, but it was also sometimes its worst. Now, we all love how rich the world of Westeros and Essos is. There's so much to love about it. But wouldn't it have been better if sometimes the show had just focused on its best bits? For instance, wouldn't we rather see more of Brienne of Tarth than Samwell Tarly? Or wouldn't more scenes between Cersei and Tyrion be better than Bran just doing the same thing for 4 seasons? It often felt like Game of Thrones was trying to make as much happen in 60 minutes as possible. And yes, it worked for the most part, but it came with its pitfalls. On the other hand, the sequel will be very focused on the Targaryens. Fans won't have to wait weeks to see their favorite characters for a 2-minute scene. No, it will be specific, quick, and in more detail. Game of Thrones' strength was in its characters, and oftentimes there was barely any of them. You're lying if you say you wouldn't have loved to see more of Jaime Lannister. But House of the Dragon won't have this problem. Anybody we love, we will get to see. Scenes won't cut to something happening on the other side of the world, completely unrelated to what we were just watching. And if that does happen, it won't be episodes till it goes back to it. All in all, the story will take its time to develop, and it won't be rushed, because something else is happening somewhere else to somebody else. Next up, the series is about the best of Game of Thrones. Ask anybody what they love about Game of Thrones the most. Hint, it was the dragons. And House of the Dragons got so many of them. Come on, it literally says in the name. We got to see so many families in the parent show, and still, the Targaryens stood out. It was the obvious first choice for a spin-off for a reason. It's the most interesting house on the show, the strongest too, and there's just so much to explore about it. Our only look into House Targaryen was Daenerys, and was she not the best thing about the show? The Mother of Dragons was one of the most fascinating characters ever, and now we'll finally get to know more about her family's history and how it all went so wrong. House of the Dragon will give viewers the build-up to Westeros' biggest war, Dance of the Dragons, which literally puts Targaryens against Targaryens. We're getting goosebumps just thinking about it. Now, the series has George R.R. Martin's approval. Could there be higher praise? George R.R. Martin, the creator of this universe, has stated that the show has characters just as he wrote them. And that's just how we like it. George has said that the show is powerful, visceral, and dark, like a Shakespearean tragedy, and we just love the sound of that. He also had great things to say about the characters, and said they were all flawed humans that the audience will be able to relate to. He stated that no one character was just all good or all bad. All of them were real. All did bad things and good things. Also, it just needs to get its ending right. Folks, it's time we talk about the elephant in the room, the Game of Thrones final season. What was once TV's biggest success went out with the worst possible finale. Even the biggest Game of Thrones fans can't make sense of it. No, really, what happened there? It's safe to say that nobody liked that ending, and well, it sets the bar pretty low for the prequel show. Just don't mess it up that badly, and they should be good. And considering that the whole story is out there, and we pretty much know how it goes, it's almost impossible for House of the Dragon to end like its predecessor. That alone makes it much better than its prequel. In fact, it will enhance Game of Thrones. Yes, you heard that right. Not only does it have the potential to be better than the original series, but it might also just end up being the thing that saves it. Nobody thinks of Game of Thrones now without being a bit hurt about how it ended. But hey, you'd forget that if you watch something so epic that it makes up for it, right? It's very rare that a prequel show is better than its parent show, but it has happened. Think about Better Call Saul. Nobody expected it to work. It wasn't a good idea on paper, but the creators have done the unthinkable. They created something beyond expectations and enhanced the world of Walter White and his meth-making adventures. House of the Dragon can do the very same thing, although it's got a much tougher task at hand. Breaking Bad never needed any saving, unlike Game of Thrones. Now, let's move on to some other related news. First up, George R.R. Martin wants Game of Thrones to be like the MCU. What is this, a crossover episode? In a recent interview with The Hollywood Reporter, George R.R. Martin talked about how he hopes that Game of Thrones becomes a proper media franchise. He said he wanted to expand his world in many ways that were kind of similar to the MCU. George appreciated all that the MCU had done with its massive, easy-to-consume projects, such as the Avengers, while also experimenting with unconventional storytelling like WandaVision. He talked about how he wanted to have a variety that showcases the history of this world, and not just fights for the Iron Throne, because there's only so many times you could do that. We don't know about you guys, but that sounds like a great idea to us. How about a sitcom starring young Arya and Sansa? Or maybe a love story about Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen, but without all the murder and betrayal. Next up, House of the Dragon won't have as much nudity as Game of Thrones. While the show will inevitably look similar to its parent show, it was recently revealed that it won't contain the same amount of nudity as Game of Thrones. HBO is being mindful of the way its show portrays sexual violence after Game of Thrones was criticized for the way it handled such scenes. And isn't that great news? There's absolutely no reason TV shows should be so graphic about violence against women. Like, nobody wants to see that. We're so glad HBO's finally doing something about it. It was about time. And finally, Steve Toussaint reveals he was racially abused after his casting. Steve Toussaint, who plays Lord Corlys Velaryon in House of the Dragon, revealed that he received a lot of racial abuse on social media when his casting was announced. He said he didn't let any of it get to him because he was delighted to be part of this world. But what is up with these fans? We can't believe stuff like this is happening in 2022. It's completely unacceptable and disgraceful. People need to learn how to behave better. Since the inception of Game of Thrones, the show was criticized for its lack of diversity, and rightly so. We're thrilled that the new series won't make that same mistake. That's a wrap for this video. Do you think House of the Dragon will be better than Game of Thrones? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.